The concept of divine union is something that has been commodified and distorted by the New Age spiritual marketplace to mean coming into contact with the person you're meant to be with, finding your twin flame, finding the love of your life, finding your soulmate, when in actuality, divine union has actually nothing to do with this. The reconciliation of the masculine and feminine modes of perception is actually the process of spiritual initiation. And when I say spiritual initiation, I'm not talking about a disembodied, etheric abstraction. I'm talking about a conscious process of what Carl Jung called individuation. So it entails psychological maturity. What this great hermetic work is, the magnum opus of alchemy, the pinnacle of all spiritual work. It's not to escape the matrix. It's not to gain esoteric knowledge. It's actually none of these things. Those are all distractions. Very simply, what the reconciliation of opposites is about, the merging of masculine and feminine, what we can call divine union, is essentially crossing this threshold between the surface world, the world that we live in, to be in the world, to think you're this little sliver of a personality that's just oriented to the external, crossing from that, the world of the surface, into the world of depth, to coming into this inner world that is as real and in many ways more real than what we can perceive with the senses. It's the realm of the soul. And this is where we can actually affect change. As seekers, as souls who chose to incarnate at this time, everyone wants to have an impact, to feel themselves making a contribution. But when you're operating from this level of depth, you know that that feeling of impact cannot come from the surface world. It's not going to come from figuring out your marketing strategy or scaling your business or making more money. Those things are byproducts of doing the depth work. All of that stuff is amazing to have. I want all of those things, and I want all of those things for you. But the only way that those byproducts are going to come from your depth, actually come from your soul, is if you do the work to actually cross that threshold. It's the life beyond your conditioning. I'm not talking about like a spiritual awakening, like, oh, you start listening to fucking Alan Watts on YouTube. It's being able to feel your true self, your capital S self, which is the layer of your being that is behind all of your conditioning, all of your masks, your persona, your childhood programming. To be able to touch that and bring that out into the world and to actually rebraid your individuality to universality, to be able to receive divine will into your body, into your being, and actually let that guide you into action in the world. That's what divine union, that's what this path actually is. It's not about meeting your soulmate or your twin flame. That's an element. That is one dimension to the holographic fractal of what divine union is. But it's also so much more. It's happening on multiple different levels. So there's the relational component to it, there's the cultural component to it, which is what we see with like the Down with the Patriarchy movement. Essentially, it's an impulse to reconcile the imbalance or over amplification of the masculine left hemisphere mode of cognition that our industrialized technological society has been built upon, and a reclaiming of the feminine mode of perception, which is more holistic and intuitive and is more ecological and communal and interconnected, a more interconnected way of perceiving life. But then there's also this psychological which really means soul. The root word of psychology is psyche, which in Greek means soul. So we're not talking about the mind, we're talking about the soul within the individuality, and how there's this different thing that's trying to be created in you. That is the whole arc of alchemy, is you're creating something, you're manifesting something into form, a potential into form that is not yet actualized. So we all have this latent potential within us to actualize this higher capacity. That's what divine union is. Okay, and so we're gonna dive into some different components of what it actually looks like to walk this path. Something I'm gonna be pulling from is this book, Meditations on the Tarot, which was published anonymously, but the author of this book is Valentin Tomberg, and I'm going to be pulling specifically from his letter on the moon. So according to a Hermetic view of what divine union actually is, it is the marriage of intelligence, or the intellect, which is the masculine, with wisdom, which could also be called divine grace or intuition, the wisdom of God. It's actually, we could say, revelation. So we have the pathway of revelation and the pathway of intellectualization or reasoning. This is really the path of technology and science, which is beautiful, but when it's divorced from the realm of wisdom, we get the world that we live in today. So this is actually what the whole gender war, this is what the spiritual, psychological dimension to the split between men and women, and an overly masculinized culture, which we label with the word patriarchy. These are downstream byproducts from this spiritual, psychological split between intelligence and wisdom. Wisdom is inherently feminine. So in the esoteric Christian tradition and the Gnostic tradition, there is this symbolic being named Sophia. So we see this in Proverbs 8. Sophia, the divine Sophia, which is essentially the personification of the wisdom of God, or we could say the personification of revelation. That's what the wisdom of God is. It's something that's revealed to you. You can't create it or gather the knowledge through your own will. It can only be received through grace. So when we're talking about the reconciliation between not only men and women, but the masculine and feminine energetics, that's what we're talking about. And so another way of framing this, and I'm going to pull from Tomberg here, the impulse of intelligence, or the masculine, seeks to understand that which is. So look at science, right? Like that's what science is all about. Understanding and explaining what is, what we can see, what's here now. Whereas wisdom, intuition, is about participating in what we're becoming. So it's actually more of an impulse from the unknown, from the uncreated, from the void, which is the feminine. Think about the feminine, she births life into creation, so it's about becoming, what we're birthing, what we're gestating. And when we align these two modes of perception, that is what we would call the alchemical marriage of the sun and moon. So that is the path on a spiritual level of inner union. So to break this down into very practical, into like the level of practicality, this would be like working with your parts, working with your conditioning, working with your wounding, so that you can see yourself clearly. This is the masculine, the masculine kind of portion of learning to understand that which is, that which you are in this moment. But then there's also this other work, which is more feminine, which is about intuiting and feeling into your soul and tapping into that thread from the future of what is not yet here, of what is being birthed, of what you're becoming. Because without one or the other, we're blind. If we don't have this intuitive feminine impulse, you're kind of trapped in this idea of what you think you are and your conditioning. And this is where we form our identity. So the feminine path, the way of integrating the feminine principle, is a constant process of identity death because you're shedding a layer and becoming something new. Shedding the skin of the snake, becoming something new. That's why the serpent is also associated with gnosis, with the feminine, with the mystery of the feminine. But if we're just in the feminine, just in the void of creation, just in this death rebirth cycle, there's no ground, there's no stability. So there's no like coherent sense of self. And in terms of cognition, in order to go beyond what is known, so we need reasoning, we need logic to be able to create a system and frameworks to understand what is known. But then we also need to be able to break out of that circle, to break out of that Ouroboros, right? And come into something, to crack the cosmic egg, so to speak, and actually come into something entirely new. So this is really a different way of creating in the world. The more masculine way is about using your own reasoning and logic and understanding to build something. If we marry that to the feminine, what we're doing is using that intelligence, that reasoning, to kind of probe into the depths of the void and intuitively or sympathetically or through resonance feel into a new creational possibility, something that we couldn't have thought of on our own, and to then bring that into the world through our vessel. And if we look at the tree of life, which is right here, right? Let's see if we get. So notice we have on the tree of life, this is going to be mirrored, right? Because I'm pointing into the camera, where are we? But there's a right side, a left side, and then there's a middle path. So this marriage of the right hand and the left hand path between intelligence and wisdom that we've been talking about opens up the middle pillar. And the middle pillar is what connects the physical realm to the Godhead. So there's an inner union that takes place between you and God and your own being, between your own intellect and your intuition. There's a relational union that takes place between a man and a woman who are both doing this work. And then when we have those two in place, we start to create art and culture from that unitive place. And we start to actually change the whole structure of life on earth, right? So this work is actually the greatest way to affect change. You can't affect change and create impact from your mind alone. And you also can't create change and affect impact from your intuition alone, because otherwise you'll just be like in a cave fucking meditating, or like in the womb room just flying off into the ethers. We need both. And when we're going through the middle path, I'll show you another image. This is the middle path is a classical path of true initiation. Okay, it is the Christic path. So we have, again, the tree of life. It's so hard to right here. And then this diagram is just showing the middle path. Okay, and there's 3 cross points on the middle path. That is why the triple cross, which you see on the other page opposite of my hand, is the classical symbol of initiation. So you cross through these 3 threshold points on your way to this new state of embodied perception and being. And these 3 levels are different traditionally. The way that I just outlined them is the inner level, the relational level, and then the communal or cultural level. And so the next question becomes, okay, how do we actually marry intelligence and intuition? How do we actually marry the masculine and feminine? Because a lot of you guys know at least some of the information that I'm talking about, but like, what is the actual process of doing that? I'm going to share a process, a way to start to really walk that path. And the interface point between intelligence or intellect and intuition is conscience. I'm not talking about conditioned cultural morality. of what culture says is right and wrong, that is programmed through politics and social agendas. Conscience is something deep within your heart, deep within your body, deep within your soul, of a knowing between what is truly right and appropriate and what is harmful and unnecessary and takes you away from creator, away from harmony with creation and all of life. So essentially, it's what is serving, actually truly in service to life, and what is anti-life, what is destructive to life, what is generative, and what is entropic. What we're really orienting towards here is objective truth, capital T truth, spiritual truth. Truth is the medicine, truth is the elixir. And in this case, I'm framing truth as a felt sense in the form of conscience. So when the intellect willingly gives up its own autonomy to serve what is right, to serve the impulse of conscience, that is when you start to bridge the masculine and feminine. That's when you start to bridge unconscious wisdom with conscious intention. And this, hear me, I get chills. This is the most overlooked element in what has been commodified in New Age spirituality. I see this everywhere, where the great work has been translated into a modern context without conscience. And so it's like what this is framed as is manifestation culture and law of attraction culture, which is essentially learn how to manipulate your subconscious so that it's aligned with your conscious mind so you can get what you want. That is a caricature of the great work. It is a corrupted carbon copy of the great work. The great work without conscience becomes self-service. It's false light. It's hijacked. There's not actually a surrendering of your will and your preference there, which is part of the humility and part of the process of submitting to conscience, which is a higher intelligence. Conscience in the classical initiation traditions is personified as the guardian of the threshold, or the guardian angel, who is the being that stands at the gate that allows you to cross from the surface world into the world of depth. And it's a real being, a higher intelligence that is a part of us, that operates archetypally within us, that is benevolent and is serving us. Because if you were to just go through the door without having to cultivate and refine your conscience, you would be overtaken by these forces and impulses that you have not learned how to tame within yourself. And this is actually what happens after death. We have to pay the bill eventually. If you don't face your own vices and your own imbalances within yourself, you're gonna have to do that upon death to be able to go into the next realm or the next octave of evolution. Because as we see in the astral realm or the dream world, your desires and impulses manifest instantly. Your identity and self-construct manifests and changes the environment instantly. And so conscience is a way to refine all of these impulses so they're all coherent and in service to a higher intelligence, a singular direction, the divine will. And what happens when you do that is that your intuitive capacity becomes a reliable source for very concrete and precise revelations that inform your intelligence. So this is real concrete guidance and direction and knowing of this is the path, this is the choice, this is the next step. That, again, is how we affect change because it's coming from coherence as opposed to fragmentation, where you're internally split trying to create change. It's not going to stick. In this lens, the next phase of evolution for humanity is essentially a moralized logic. And again, not culturally moral. It's not programmed by what the reigning political structure tells you is right or wrong. Again, it's a deeper knowing within each of us. And that soul level moral logic is superior to the formal logic of science and technology and progress. That is what's going to take us into the world that we want to create. That is what is also going to take us into individually a life that is expansive and flourishing, but also feels correct and true and rightful for us. Okay, so that is a glimpse into what the true path of divine union actually is and entails. And if you are someone who's interested in this form of inner work, the great work, spiritual evolution in a way that's really practical and actually impacts our day-to-day lives, our relationships, the decisions we make, etc., stick around. I invite you to subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and Substack as well. You can hop on my email list where I share things that I don't share on social media, and all the links for that will be in the description. And if you liked this episode, this video, I invite you to share it with a friend, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.